There we go. So, welcome to Frankston City Library's FrankTALK with Jake Avila. Now, have I said your surname correctly?
You have, Katie. Thank
Oh,
you.
good, Avila. So, first of all, we'd like to acknowledge the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation on whose land Frankston City Libraries operates and extend our respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to extend that respect to any elders from other communities who may be joining us today. So, Jake, we're so thrilled to have you today, especially in Victoria, given our current state of affairs. And I feel as though your latest release, Cave Diver, is the perfect escapism for a situation like lockdown. It's a wonderful way to, basically escape into another world. And I feel as though I'm sort of 8 chapters in. I feel as though as much as it is an adventure novel, it's also a story about love, and it's also a story about grief, and the ways in which we deal with that, and a story about family and relationships and lots of different things. So can you start off by telling us a little bit about the book?
Sure. I mean, it's about a broken man who's an underwater explorer who's lost his wife in a controversial diving accident, and he's seeking to rebuild his career. And he receives an opportunity to go on an expedition to Papua to explore a legendary cavern. But what he doesn't realize is that he's there under false pretenses, and there's some bad guys wishing to use his skills to salvage a Japanese treasure sub. And from then on, it becomes a sort of a white knuckle roller coaster ride of survival, dodging man-eating crocs, avoiding poison arrows, and also fighting his own demons in the blackness of the cave.
I really like that correlation between, a struggle for survival and his own sort of rebirth in a way. It's very symbolic, isn't it?
It is absolutely, because I guess denial is part of the human condition. And it sort of fascinates me how we can, when we sort of finally realize what it is that we're struggling with, we can move on. And that's a big part of this story. It is definitely a redemptive quest. Somebody said recently it was like adventure for grown-ups. So I thought that was a nice way of describing the story.
It is. And what drew you to, I'm just admitting somebody else, what drew you to writing about this particular subject matter? Are you a diver?
I can't claim to be a diver anymore. I did an open water scuba diving course in my youth, which was great. But it was, I guess what drew me to the story was a couple of things. One, I've always had this fascination for remote places, lost worlds, artifacts turning up. Think about, lost cities like Machu Picchu and Angkor Wat. And I suppose Papua New Guinea and Papua, the World War II, they're still finding old tanks and aeroplanes turning up. And I guess it just, it sort of that inspired me, that vision of something turning up on our doorstep. And then the story evolved from there. But as for the diving, I didn't realize that would be my a big part of the story until I did a story for Inside Sport on cave diving. And when I found myself, standing in a little muddy cave, watching these men and women sliding beneath the earth, and it looked just absolutely horrifying. I'm not particularly claustrophobic, but I was, I knew I couldn't do it. So it fascinated me, and those two ideas are what sort of gave me the idea for the story.
That's really cool. It actually, just listening to you speak then, reminded me of that. There's that documentary on Netflix at the moment called My Octopus Teacher. It's about a free diver. Have you watched it?
I've heard of it. No, I haven't seen it.
I think you'd enjoy it. It's really, it's also about the human condition and healing, and but teamed with free diving. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
Yeah, you should do. And so tell me a little bit about so this book has won the Wilbur Smith Adventure Writing Prize, winner for 2020. Tell me about that experience of being shortlisted and then receiving that prize. What was that like?
it was sort of, I guess it was like stepping out of a cave into the light, to be honest. You know, I'd been trying to self-publish the book from about 2017 onwards. And, you know, even when I won the Clive Cussler Grand Master Award in America, which was great in itself, I was still self-publishing and I was still struggling. It's just so difficult to be heard. And so winning the Wilbur Smith was important in a couple of ways. One, it was like they were going to publish it if it was good enough. And then that actually led to a bona fide book deal. And then that whole editorial process of working with editors and then copy editors and you know, just making it a much better product. And I guess it was very validating, you know, because when you're struggling alone, you start to question yourself. You don't know whether you're dreaming, you know. And I do also know this, that like anything, there's a lot of really talented people in all fields, especially in the arts, who never get any recognition, and they could be quite brilliant. So for me, it was just I feel so grateful for that opportunity, because it's given me a little a foot in the door.
It's really interesting to hear people's publishing stories, because it's literally everyone has a different journey to finally being published or deciding to self-publish. There's no sort of cookie cutter. I know a lot of aspiring writers, or lots of writers who are aiming to get published, would love, you know, the answer, how do you do it? But it has been different for everybody.
Yes, and I contrast it to my first foray into getting published, which was, you know, in the early noughties. I wrote a couple of, you know, pretty bad, actually, you know, horror books and paranormal romance, but I did get agent interest. So I was, you know, it was very thrilling, but it came to nothing. So when I wrote Cave Diver many years later, I thought, I knew it was a better book. I knew it was a more commercial product. And so the you know, the disappointment was greater when I just got that deafening silence. And for whatever reason, not, you know, one thing's for sure is that, you know, we know fiction sales have been in decline in the last 15 years. So I felt like it was even harder to break in these days. And with self-publishing, I mean, I read somewhere that 6,000 titles are uploaded to Amazon every day. So, you know, how do you cut through that? It's really tricky.
It is. And so tell me a little bit about your writing process now, and how it's sort of evolved or changed since those, you know, early sort of horror things that you'd write. How's your process changed now? What's it like? What's the research versus writing ratio that you do?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, especially because at the moment I struggle with, am I writing, am I editing, or am I researching? Because you can be sort of, you know, you feel like, I'm visualizing the scene, the emotional aspect, the character arc. You're juggling all these different elements, and then suddenly you might come to this thing. But, you know, hang on, would a C-17 Globemaster have a door that you can parachute out of on that side, or, you know, something like that? And you suddenly think, okay, I can just keep going, but maybe I'll just go and have a look, because it will save me doing it later. And so research for me is ongoing. Definitely with this book, there was a great amount of research over many years, because I accumulated a lot of books on Papua New Guinea. And also I needed technical help with the cave diving, which was generously provided by the former president of the Australian Cave Diving Association. So he was invaluable for technical veracity, because I wanted it to feel real. And that was one of the challenges too. Like, do you give enough research so that, you know, it actually is, you know, you're trying to suspend disbelief. Can the reader really get involved with this? But too much, and, you know, they start flicking the pages. So you want that balance where, you know, if there's a little bit of a flick, it's not too far down the page.
Mm. And what about researching in terms of visiting the places like Papua New Guinea, and then, like, I think there was a part like at the mouth of the Octopus Cave.
Yes.
Like at the Nullarbor. Is that a real place?
No.
Oh, it's so cool. I thought it was. I was like, I'm going to go there. That sounds amazing.
Well, it's sort of, I mean, I guess it's a bit similar with Papua. Like the Husenbeck Cavern is a fiction that I created. And I did it for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted the freedom to create my own dramatic environment. And two, because I couldn't go there. With Papua, I did really want to go there. But when I investigated it at the time, it was going to be like $10,000 just to get a tourist boat up the Sepik. And I just didn't have the resources. And also I knew that it wouldn't be quite the same. And I wasn't quite intrepid enough to visualize myself, rocking up and paying someone for a canoe ride. And with the Nullarbor, those caves, they're sealed off to the public. They're quite big sinkholes and quite dangerous. So it was sort of like, I guess I treated it like you would a historical novel. I had to sort of just do the research and then use all that detail and then the written word to sort of create the illusion of reality.
Yeah, so almost like that historical fiction type of style where, it's sort of based in reality. It's got just enough reality in it that you had me believing that there was a cool...
I think it's a bit like a pastiche. You're taking these elements and then weaving them into your own story, which is sort of why in the acknowledgements, amongst thanking all the people that had helped me, I also acknowledged the people of the island of New Guinea and asked them to forgive me for taking any liberties with my imaginings, because I'm quite sure some of them might pick it up and go, "What?" But it's fiction. It's a story, and and I think touching on that is that lost world element. How there are so few places left now on this planet where it's all been plumbed, it's all been explored. And that is one of the few places left on the world where very few people go there, and in large part due to the political situation.
That's really cool. That's cool. I was just going to ask, what was it? I can't remember. So tell me, what is on your reading pile at the moment? I can see loads of books in the background there.
Yeah.
What are you reading?
Well, at the moment, I'm reading The Survivors by Jane Harper. So I'm sort of a bit of mystery, Australian noir. And I'm also reading Hamnet because my sister-in-law sent it to me. And as a former English teacher who's pretty fond of Shakespeare, I'm sort of enjoying that. I've also usually got a big pile of non-fiction on the go. Like quite often I have to sort of make myself read fiction because it's very educational, looking at how other good writers formulate their work. But I'm always drawn to non-fiction and history in particular. So most of what you see behind you is that.
That's great. I remembered what I was going to ask. It was as you were talking about, writing the story. Do you plot out, like, how much do you plan in terms of your writing and the timeline and the story arc, and how much do you discover through your writing about your characters, and how much are they just speaking to you rather than you creating them?
I think for me, I like to have a plan to start with, simply to give me the confidence to begin on this big journey. But I guess what I'm learning is that will change as the characters come alive and things just bubble up in your subconscious. Like I sleep with a pad next to my bed because I often find that dawn, just when you just wake up is often when the little ideas will come to you, and you need to get them down before you forget them. But yeah, I had these dreadful, walls full of index cards. And, you're sort of tearing your hair out. You want these things to happen, but what order? And then you suddenly realize you've ridden yourself into a corner because that couldn't possibly have happened because they were over here, and et cetera, et cetera. So, it's an ongoing process, but I like to, you've got to allow the story to take over. And when it does, it can be quite exhilarating because what's really motivating you to write it is coming out in those moments. And in terms of this book, I can remember even right up to the very last edits, when it was almost, ready to hit print, there was still just that, I won't go into the detail, but this final penultimate scene of self-realization. I was never quite happy with it. And I think I finally got it as good as it was ever going to get it at the last minute.
Mm.
You know, and that maybe no one else would have noticed, but for me, it was just the truth of that moment for that character.
Mm. And so, yeah, when you talk about that, it's sort of the reasons that you're writing sort of reveal themselves. So towing that, walking that line between grief and adventure, was there something that drew you to create Nash's backstory, through that it's grief and that sort of thing? I feel like I can see his motivation for accepting this mission because of other things happening.
Yes.
Yeah, so why grief and why loss and why?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I don't know if I mean, there's an element of, the self in all characters. And I suppose I've always been drawn to redemption. And I don't know if there's any sort of, great darkness that I'm trying to redeem, but I feel like you want to be your best self. And I'm just drawn to characters. I'm always drawn to stories where the character's not resolved. They're not necessarily a strong person who's brought low, even though Nash is a strong person. He has an elemental weakness like we all do. And I suppose it's that journey of self-discovery is just as powerful as the physical journey into the earth. So there was a metaphor there for as you said earlier, for rebirth. I think I'm losing the thread. What was the question again?
I think it was just, sort of why grief? Because I feel like Nash has got, the grief of, and it's not saying too much because it says it on the back, doesn't it?
Yeah, losing his
Natalie.
wife.
Yeah, losing Natalie, but then other elements without giving too much away, of loss that is sort of a driving motivator for him to accept the mission. I guess I'm just curious as to like why choose grief as a motivator to go on this adventure with him.
Okay.
I'm curious.
Yeah, no, it's a good question because a lot of action adventure stories, and I love action adventure as a genre. I love getting a bag of chips and, and if it's a movie, sitting down and watch Arnold Schwarzenegger or The Rock, it's a great romp. And I wanted to have a story that was fun and exciting like that. But I suppose I just wanted a character who had a little bit more depth and struggle going on. It was just more entertaining for me to write as that interpersonal journey. And I think now that I've begun work on a sequel, that's one of the challenges is, okay, Rob Nash he's come out the other side, but is he the Rock? What else is going on in his life? What keeps it interesting for me and keeps the reader motivated to sort of share that journey. So yeah, I guess I just wanted a three-dimensional character. And I think grief and redemption are powerful drivers in most people's lives. Most of us have to overcome things and move on. And I felt that, putting someone in extreme danger and going along would make it even more of a vicarious white knuckle ride. Because we really feel like, oh my goodness, is he gonna be able to do this? Can he overcome?
Yeah, and that's right. I think that's what makes that particular character so relatable, isn't it? Is that he has got some depth. He's not, it's not sort of the hero, sweeping in. It's he's like human, isn't he?
That's right. He's not an archetypal hero, and I suppose when I was working out how to tell the story, there was a lot of challenges in trying to position him as a flawed hero, because one of my earlier books I'd had a flawed hero, but he wasn't likable enough. And if it's okay to have a flawed baddie who's not likable enough, but if you need a protagonist that you really want to emotionally connect to, in order to forgive them their flaws, they have to have some redeeming qualities too. So that was one of the, how do I make, and back to your earlier question about his motivations, it couldn't just be, another adventure, great, I'll just take off on that. There had to be a compelling reason to drag him out of the depths that he was in to make him go.
It's beautiful. And so what advice would you give to, I'm sure we've got some aspiring writers here today. What's your best advice that you could give people who are trying to get published or who are trying to get down, that first 10,000 words, what would you say to them?
I think, I think perseverance, and I think above all, do it. You have to do it because you want to do it. I mean, for me, don't get me wrong. Like I want to succeed and have readers. I don't know how long my writing career would be if I never had a reader. I want that connection, and I need, I've got to pay the bills like everybody else. But I think that I guess the difference when I first wrote 15 years ago, I suppose it was sort of more naivety, but also more optimism. This time round, it was like a deep-seated need in me to write and to tell this story that had been eating away at me. And so perseverance and do it for you as much as anybody else. It's really because I read a great quote recently from a literary agent. Actually, he's a literary agent who was interested in me right at the beginning. He's now retired, but he's got an excellent book for any aspiring writers. His name's Noah Lukeman. He's got some free ebooks. One of them's like, how to find and approach an agent. And, he's great advice, but he was essentially saying it can take up to 20 years to become a great writer. And I can really believe it, because it's a trial and error thing. And, especially when you're working alone, when you don't get, okay, I've got beta readers, friends, family, and I got manuscript assessments. They all help. Doing a writing course is great. Networking, workshopping with other writers, all that's valuable. But at the end of the day, it does take time. It's a time thing. And the other thing, of course, is read a lot so that you can kind of appreciate what it takes to construct a story. There's lots of things going on that, until you actually struggle and try to do it yourself, you are not really aware of.
And who is your first reader for your drafts?
Yeah, that's my wife. Fortunately for me, she's an avid reader and she loves audiobooks. So she's quite happy to listen to first draft stuff and is often, saying, well, come on, give me something to listen to. So, and it's quite funny because you know what it's like with your partner. You tend to, when I've got an editor saying something, I'm usually taking, I'm listening more deeply, and sometimes, but usually she's right. Usually what she says, I think you've missed some emotional depth there, or there's too much action, or whatever she's saying. She usually turns out to be right, and it's great for me to get that quick audience, because when you're alone, it's a solitary pursuit. And even with my friends who are beta readers, I don't want to give them stuff that's too raw, so I might not send them anything for a year. So it's lovely to have that first reader.
That's great, and particularly because she is such an avid reader, she knows what. Well, I think you're right. I think reading sets us up to be experts at finding, there's something missing there, or we know the way a tale usually goes and the pace and that sort of thing. So
yes,
yeah, that's great. That you've got her on standby to listen. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And can you tell me a little bit more? What's the coolest thing that you learned about diving from that expert? Was there any? There's a part in the caves where Nash is talking about the recycled air breathing thing. Well, what other cool facts and things did you learn? Is there anything that surprised you?
I suppose I just ended up with an even deeper respect for what they do, because it really is mind over matter. And with cave diving, there are numerous examples of extremely experienced divers panicking when they have an equipment failure. So even with a lot of training, you are so dependent on your gear. I describe it as an astronaut in inner space. Once that equipment goes, unless they've all got backups and secondary backups, but it's, that human instinct I need to breathe can overwhelm everything. I think, the Thai cave rescue a couple of years ago, An Do did he painted, I forget the Australian of the Year's name, but one of the Australian divers who went in there and rescued someone. And so if you're after a non-fiction, white knuckle explanation of cave diving, that's it. Because, just my limited experience going into an underground cave and watching divers disappear, it was just like, no way. I mean, I got claustrophobic on that submarine in Darling Harbour, the HMS Onslow. You know, I was okay as long as until there was someone in front of me and behind me, and I'm quite a big bloke, and I just suddenly felt, I want to get out of here. So that, you know,
it goes against all your instincts, doesn't it, to fully submerge yourself and in small spaces. It's just not human nature. Like, yeah, that survival instinct is just get me out.
It is, and you know, so yeah, so when you know, it can be complete darkness or complete lack of visibility. You know, your air supply is keeping you alive, but only for so long, and then you've got to look out for the bends. You know, then you've got to decompress. Then with these rebreathers that are incredibly sophisticated, you know, in the old days, you know, they used to need tanks. They might need 20 tanks of different mixtures of helium and oxygen and nitrogen all spread out along the route, laid down by previous dives. You know, now you can go down with a rebreather that you can breathe almost indefinitely on. However, it's got computer controls, but you need to be able to understand it if something goes wrong. So it's highly technical, and you've really got to have a cool head on your shoulders, I think, to be a cave diver. I think you know that was one of the tragedies of the Thai cave rescue, actually, wasn't it? That one of the Thai rescue divers, I think he was a commando, unfortunately he drowned, because even good divers, everything changes once you get into a cave.
Oh,
yeah.
so great. And so can you you mentioned that you're working on a sequel.
Yes.
Can you tell us anything about that at the moment?
Yes, I can. It's another Rob Nash story. I had a couple of ideas in mind, but the nod from the publishers was, we'd like another one of these, please. So it's set in the Southern Ocean. It said it's a new location, new set of baddies, and Rob is, you know, moving on to a new set of personal challenges as he does what he does.
Wonderful. That sounds terrific. We can't wait. And when will that come out? Do you know when that will be?
I'm not sure. I'm sort of about.
No pressure.
I'm about 20% of the way into it, and I haven't got a contract yet. I think we've got to see how Cave Diver sells.
Okay. Yes. Well, we won't. It's just come out.
That's it.
No, I'm happy that you're writing. That's fabulous for us.
Yes. No. Thank you.
Good. Now we're just about on the half-hour mark. So if you like, we can open up to, does anyone have any questions? If you do, feel free to just pop them either in the chat. Let me just see if I know how to work my computer. Yeah, you can pop them in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and jump in and ask Jake a question. We'll give you a minute. Oh, we've got somebody. Someone's jumping in now as well with just joining. Hi, Tegan. We've just been talking for about half an hour, Tegan. So we're just opening up to questions to Jake. So if you do have a question, feel free to unmute yourself. And we are recording as well, by the way, for our YouTube channel.
Hi, Jake. It's Deb here. I just have a question about what you enjoy most about the writing process and what gives you the most satisfaction.
Hi, Deb. I think for me, the satisfaction is when I feel that I've completely realized the developing scene inside my head. You know, because I'm trying to grab the reader with an experience, and even though I might not have had it directly, it's my imagination of this gripping moment or this powerful emotional climax, and I'm trying to do it justice. And what I find is it takes, you know, numerous drafts to achieve that, and you know, there's usually always elements of the very beginning in that final draft, but it takes time, and it's like this juggling act of balance between description, exposition, dialogue, and just the thrust, the energy of the story. So I think I do take satisfaction when I feel something reading it myself, and that doesn't always happen. But if I feel emotion, then I feel like, yeah, I must be getting there.
Does that answer your question, Deb?
Yeah, thanks for that. Also, when you plan your novel, did you know what was going to happen at the end from the start, or did it go in a different direction as you were writing?
I think I didn't know exactly the details of the plot, how it would pan out, but I knew how I wanted the character's redemptive quest to end. And so I think that's a good point, actually, because sometimes we get so, and I'm guilty of it too, you can get so caught up in plot that you forget, where's the energy in the story? Because if we don't care about the character's emotional arc, it's just stuff happening, isn't it? So yeah, so for me, that's what I'm learning to do, is sort of, I tend to plot and get caught up in what's happening next. But then what makes the story stronger is when I remember the character and bring that to the fore and get that balance right.
Thanks for that.
Pleasure.
Now, have we got any other questions from anyone in the audience? Feel free to unmute yourself and jump in.
Hi, this is Neil. I'm Deb's husband. I'm just sitting here with hi, Jake.
Hi, Neil.
I just had a question regarding the writing process, and how do you balance the amount of research that you're doing, particularly when you're getting into a technical subject matter that is perhaps outside or at least a little bit outside your life experience. How do you make sure that you don't go too far down the rabbit hole with that?
Yeah, I guess what I do is sometimes if I'm getting assistance from somebody else, I might have my questions, and I'll sort of be pushing them in the direction that I, as the writer, want to go in, and then they're hitting me with reality. So I'm constantly adjusting what I want to happen in the story to what they're telling me, and obviously you take liberties where you can. With the other thing I do is and this is where people are so generous with their time, is that it's like you send them galleys. So I might write I'll say with the diving, I'd interrogate the guy John that helped me. How would this work? How would that work? I'd try to understand what he said as best I could. I'd write the scene, and then I'd get him to read it. And then he might be going, oh, that makes sense, that doesn't. And so it's a bit of trial and error. And then it was also a matter of, in the editorial process, of stripping it back, because, you can get attached to your research because you put so much into it, but it might be, slightly too much. And we certainly did strip quite a lot of it out and just keep the very best, material. But I feel like, there's an old adage that research should be like an iceberg. The reader should only be aware of the tip of it. But one of the lovely things about research is that it adds to the story. Like, as soon as you start going down that rabbit hole, that is also a danger, because, oh, wow, I'd never thought of that permutation, or that this could change everything. So I think there's a balancing act between doing a lot of research early and then starting to write. It can lead to some wonderful ideas, but it can also just be like an avalanche and you're buried under it. By the same token, I tend to do research every day, as I was saying earlier on in the interview, because I suddenly get, oh, what about this? And I'll go over there, and that can pull you out of the flow of writing. So I guess for me, I'm sort of, I don't have a fixed pattern on that, but I think research certainly strengthens the writing and helps it from being two-dimensional.
Yeah, thanks for that. I was always fascinated with I guess Tolkien and the fact that he spent so much time building this massive world that then he only actually showed us a very small part of, if you like, in the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, etc. And that there was a massive world. How much of a world do you create that doesn't go into the novel?
I think I created a lot in this novel that didn't go in. And it was also, as I was saying earlier in the interview, because I haven't been to Papua and I knew I was creating these fictitious environments for this action to happen, I had to draw diagrams and maps. And I remember my father going, I just don't see that. So it did, all those criticisms helped me to build a world and then try to explain it as simply as possible. In terms of something like Tolkien, I mean, fantasy authors have an enormous job to create, because they're responsible for everything. I could sort of, use elements of the real world and fabricate things. Another book that I've been working on in the last couple of years is Speculative Fiction, set sort of starting 15 years in the future. And that's been hugely more challenging in terms of fabricating that world, because I'm responsible. I have to understand as best I can the cultural, political, social mores, and then work out what my characters are doing in there, and then put it to the test with other readers who, because we might spot, gaps in the fabric of this fiction you've created.
Yeah, thank you. That's very interesting. Cheers. Thanks.
Neil.
Great questions there. Has anyone else got anything to add or anything they'd like to know about the writing process, or about the characters, or about diving, or motivation, or muse, or anything?
I've got a question. I'm still here. I'm gonna duck out soon though.
Okay.
It's Kerry here. Sorry.
Hi, Kerry.
Are you likely to take up diving again?
Hi, Kerry. It's possible. My brother's just done an open water diving course again. He did one with me in the 80s. That's how long ago it was.
Oh, wow.
But he, I might join him. I was surfing quite a lot till a shoulder, problem sort of kept me out of the water, and then all the shark attacks. So, being a writer with a vivid imagination, you can sort of feel, I think you feel what might be under there more than other surfers. So I don't know, but I did love scuba diving. I love that feeling of weightlessness, and but no, you won't get me into a cave.
Fair enough. The reason why I actually jumped on this was because I haven't read the book yet, but I'm keen to read it. But I am a diver, and I have dived in PNG before.
Oh wow!
So, it was that's why I'm just like, oh, this is all my all my experiences brought to life in your book. Well,
yeah,
not everything, obviously, but yeah, I mean, as you were saying earlier about all the World War II stuff, it's fascinating. I mean, there's a wealth of history there, under the water, that's pretty much untouched, and it's quite interesting. The people of Papua New Guinea are so incredibly friendly and just beautiful people. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading how you've described, the culture and the background and, the environment there. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Kerry. I hope you'd enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, I'll send you some feedback once I have.
Yeah, no, please do.
And Kerry, have you ever done any cave diving?
I did actually in Papua New Guinea.
You did do cave diving,
but it was a local. It was the village's local freshwater source. So we had to be very, very careful with how we actually dived. We could not fin around too much. We pretty much had to keep our fin very, very steady and our movements very small. But it was quite amazing. One of the things that we actually went through was it's called a halot line, where you get salt water and fresh water mixed, and it's almost like diving into your eyes go quite blurry, so it's quite fascinating.
I know about those from Jake's book about the fresh water on top of the salt water.
Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, sorry, I forgot. Oh, and in terms of another cave, well, I'm not qualified to do a proper cave dive, but I have dived in Mount Gambier in the sinkhole called, what is it called again? Kilsby's. sinkhole, which is a 30-meter hole just in the middle of a farm paddock. And yeah, it's pretty amazing. But again, everything, you have to be so careful because it silts up very quickly. So, and I've got quite a few friends who are cave divers. So their experiences have been quite interesting to hear about and also quite scary. I don't know that I'd really do it. I don't think I've got the smarts to do all the mixes and, you know, all those calculations. I'd rather just sort of have to dive without thinking about all that stuff.
Yes, it's highly technical, isn't it?
It is. It is. So yeah. But anyway, I just wanted to say thank you very much for today's chat. I've learned a lot already.
Thank you, Carrie. Appreciate it.
All right.
Terrific. And has anyone got any other questions? That was great. How fortuitous that we had a real life cave diver in here. All right. If there's no other questions, I've just got my daughter strolling around in the background.
Circling.
She's listening to everything.
Yeah.
That's the next thing. She'll be like, so when are we going cave diving?
Yeah,
yeah. That'll be PE tomorrow. All right, guys, if there's no other questions, we might wrap up. Just having a look to see there's no other little microphones going on. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jake. That was really, really enjoyable to hear all about the book and to hear all about diving and your creative process and everything. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And can you tell us, where can we find you on, are you on Facebook and Instagram?
Yes, I am. And I've got a website too, jakeavila.com.au, where you
Beautiful.
can find me. And yeah, and it's a bit of information there.
Terrific. And where can people get their hands on your book?
It's available online, Booktopia, Amazon. I think you can order it from most bookshops, and it's also physically in some bookshops too. But you have to check it out.
Terrific. And I know that it's available via audiobook on Audible at the moment as well. I don't like to pay things,
the chap that narrated it, Adam Fitzgerald, is brilliant Australian voice actor. He was also in The Crown. He had a minor role in The Crown as one of Bob Hawke's aides, but his accents are incredible. Like, he really has got an amazing range. So because they realized they needed someone because there's so many different characters in the book.
And it's amazing to be able to flip between in one conversation to have sort of a South African accent.
That's
and
right.
then Australian, and just to flip, very talented. Oh, that's terrific. I'll pop the links to Booktopia and to any local booksellers as well in the notes of when we post this on YouTube too. So by the time someone's watching this, you can see the links.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks,
Terrific.
Katie.
Well, thank you so much for that, and all the best with the rest of your lockdown and the rest of your year and the rest of your writing. And we hope one day we'll be able to have you in the library.
That would be lovely.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Jake, for joining us. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jake.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
See you later. Thank you. Bye.